No one survived 12 hours with the Mafia boss Quadruplets. Until she arrived and made them go silent. Linda Matthews stood in the doorway of the Merino nursery, watching four identical boys in blood-red silk pajamas systematically destroy what had once been a $40,000 designer space. A marble lamp shattered against the wall inches from her head. Toy soldiers were being used as actual weapons. One boy was calmly cutting up expensive leather furniture with craft scissors, while another poured juice into an imported Persian rug. But what made Linda's breath catch wasn't the violence. It was the precision of it. These weren't tantrums. These were calculated attacks. "You leave now, or we make you cry," shouted Enzo, the ringleader, his small face twisted in manufactured rage. His three brothers, Luca, Dante, and Marco, formed a defensive line behind him like tiny soldiers at war. Their eyes were hard, cold, far too old for 4-year-olds. They had broken 49 nannies in 12-hour shifts, and Linda could see they were already planning exactly how to break her. But as Linda looked at these four warriors in miniature, she didn't see the merino monsters the staff whispered about. She saw four terrified children performing violence because it was the only language they'd been taught in a house where love was a liability. "I know you think this will make me leave," Linda said quietly, stepping over broken glass without flinching. "And I know you've gotten very good at making people afraid of you." The boys froze, confused by her lack of fear. Nannies usually screamed by now. Some cried, most ran. Enzo's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You don't know anything about us." Linda knelt down, meeting them at eye level despite the debris. "You're right. I don't know everything yet. But I know you're not bad. I know you're scared that if you let someone close, they'll disappear like your mama did. And I know you think if you're dangerous enough, no one can hurt you first." The four boys exchanged glances, a silent language between them that spoke of shared trauma and survival strategies. "But here's what I'm going to show you by the end of today," Linda continued, her voice steady as steel. "I'm going to show you that being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to stop fighting." Luca, the quietest one, tilted his head. "What if we don't want to stop?" "Then I'll sit here in the chaos until you're ready," Linda said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." The sudden sound of heavy footsteps in the marble hallway made all four boys go rigid with fear. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Papa is coming," Dante whispered, his tough facade cracking. "He's going to send you away for letting us make a mess." But what happened when Catone Marino entered that nursery would shock the entire household, including the boss who had spent 6 months believing his sons were beyond saving, and the woman who was about to prove that the most dangerous man in the city had never learned the most powerful weapon of all: gentleness. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place, settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. Catone Marino could order a man's death with a single text message. He controlled 3 ports, 15 construction companies, and half the city council. Senators returned his calls within minutes. Rival families crossed the street when they saw his motorcade approaching. His name alone could make grown men weep. But at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the most feared man in the eastern seaboard was standing in his silk pajama bottoms, holding a stuffed giraffe, begging a 4-year-old to please, for the love of God, go back to sleep. "No," Enzo said simply, staring at his father with those unsettling merino eyes, dark, calculating, absolutely remorseless. Catone's jaw tightened. He'd negotiated hostage situations with more success than bedtime. "Enzo, it's 3 in the morning. Don't care." The other 3 boys were now awake too, sitting up in their matching beds like a tiny tribunal. Luca was watching with scientific interest. Dante was smirking. Marco was already climbing out of bed, ready to join whatever chaos was about to unfold. This was Catone's empire now, not the penthouse office with bulletproof windows overlooking the harbor, not the private clubs where deals were sealed with blood and scotch. This nursery, with its custom murals and designer furniture that got destroyed weekly, this was where his power ended. The irony was suffocating. He'd built an empire on fear and respect. Yet he couldn't command 4 children who barely reached his waist. His own sons looked at him like he was a minor inconvenience, a problem to be managed rather than a father to be obeyed. Your mother would have, Catone started, then stopped. The words died in his throat as 4 pairs of eyes went instantly cold. They never spoke about their mother. Not since the funeral. Not since the investigation that concluded accidental overdose. But left questions that haunted this house like ghosts. After she died, the boys had stopped crying and started destroying. They went from angelic to tactical overnight, as if they'd collectively decided that being loved meant being vulnerable, and vulnerable meant being left. Catone ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his tattoos, his reputation, his billions. None of it worth anything in this room. Fine, he said quietly, defeated. Who wants ice cream? 4 identical smiles appeared. Calculated, victorious, terrifying. His sons had learned the most important lesson of the Marino family. Find your opponent's weakness and exploit it without mercy. He just never thought he'd be the opponent. Linda had interviewed with warlords disguised as hedge fund managers, with celebrity parents who treated children like accessories, with families so broken they made dysfunction look like an art form. But she'd never interviewed with a man who had 3 armed guards standing behind him like breathing threats. Catone Marino didn't shake her hand. He studied her the way predators study prey, looking for weakness, for the exact moment she'd break. You understand what you're signing up for? His voice was smooth, dangerous, accented with old-world precision. 49 nannies. The longest lasted 14 hours. Most don't make it past breakfast. Linda met his gaze without flinching. I read the file. Reading and surviving are different things, Ms. Matthews. Dr. Matthews, she corrected quietly. And I don't scare easily. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe respect, possibly irritation. Before he could respond, a crash exploded from upstairs, then screaming. Then what sounded like furniture being thrown against walls. The guards didn't move. Catone didn't even glance toward the noise. That's Act 1, he said flatly. They're testing you already. Most applicants run during the interview. Linda stood, smoothing her dress. Should we go meet them? You still want the job? More than before. Catone's expression was unreadable as he led her upstairs, his guards flanking them like a funeral procession. The nursery door was open. Inside, chaos reigned, but it was too perfect, too staged. One boy was crying dramatically near an overturned bookshelf. Another was, accidentally, stepping on broken glass, trying to look injured. The third was shouting about blood, though Linda saw no actual wounds. The fourth stood in the center, watching her with cold calculation. Oh no, Linda said calmly, walking past the performance. Enzo, Luca, Dante, Marco. Hello. The crying stopped instantly. They hadn't expected her to use their names. She knelt beside the injured boy, gently checking his foot. Clean. No cuts. Just red marker drawn on like blood. Clever, she said softly. Very convincing staging. Who planned this? 4 faces went blank with shock. Behind her, Catone's voice was ice. They're manipulating you. Linda glanced back at him, then at his sons. No, she said. They're protecting themselves. There's a difference. She turned back to the boys, her voice dropping to just for them. The test is over. You can stop performing now. For the first time in 6 months, the Merino nursery went completely silent. Hour 1. Enzo threw a toy train at her head. Linda caught it mid-air, set it down gently, and sat on the floor. I'll wait, she said. Hour 2. They dumped an entire container of building blocks around her, creating a barrier. She didn't move, just sat there, breathing steadily, her presence solid as stone. Hour 3. Luca tried negotiation. If you leave now, we won't tell Papa you're bad at this. Linda smiled. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Hour 4. Dante escalated. He grabbed her purse, dumped the contents, and stomped on her phone. The screen cracked. Linda picked it up, looked at it, then at him. That was expensive, she said calmly. But I understand you needed to see if breaking my things would break me. His face crumpled with confusion. Hour 5. They ignored her completely, playing violent games where everyone died. She watched without judgment, noting the patterns, the way they never played rescue, only destruction. Hour 6. Marco, the quietest, sat 3 feet away from her. Not close enough to trust, but close enough to test. You're still here, he whispered. I'm still here, Linda confirmed. Hour 7. They tried to exhaust her. Running in circles, screaming, demanding juice then refusing it, asking for books then throwing them. Linda sat through it all like a lighthouse in a storm, unmoved, unshaken, simply present. Hour 8. Enzo, the leader, finally cracked. Why won't you yell at us? His voice was small, lost. Linda looked at him directly. Because you're not doing anything wrong. You're just checking if I'm safe. Hour 9. The energy shifted. The chaos slowed. One by one, they drifted closer to her orbit, like planets finally finding gravity. Hour 10. Dante sat beside her. Then Marco. Then Luca. Enzo held out the longest, pride and fear warring on his small face. Hour 11. Are you hungry? Linda asked softly. 4 heads nodded. She made sandwiches while they watched from doorways, still cautious. They ate in silence, testing if kindness had conditions. Hour 12. Exhausted, they curled up near her. Not on her, not yet, but close. Close enough that when Catoni opened the door expecting World War III, he found 5 people sleeping in a pile on the nursery floor, and for the first time in 6 months, his house was quiet. The silence was deafening. Linda found the shrine by accident. She'd been looking for extra blankets in the hallway closet when she noticed the door didn't close properly. Behind winter coats and storage boxes, someone had created a small space. 4 photographs of a beautiful woman with kind eyes, a dried flower, a lipstick, and a child's drawing that said, "Sorry, Mama," in shaky letters. Her heart fractured. That evening, after dinner, she sat with the boys in the dimly lit nursery. "Tell me about your mama," she said softly. 4 bodies went rigid. Enzo's face turned to stone. "We don't talk about her." "Why not?" "Because Papa gets sad," Marco whispered. "And because it's our fault," Luca added, his voice barely audible. Linda's professional mask almost slipped. "Your fault?" Dante nodded, tears already forming. "We were too loud. We made too much noise. Mama had headaches and we didn't stop running, and then she—" His voice broke. "Then she went to sleep and didn't wake up." The pieces fell into horrible place. Their mother had died of an overdose, prescription pills mixed with alcohol. The boys had been in the house. They'd been loud, like children are. And somehow, in their 4-year-old minds, they'd constructed a narrative where their noise, their energy, their very existence had killed her. "Oh, my loves," Linda breathed, pulling them close despite their resistance. Is that why you're so loud now? Because you think if you're loud enough, she'll hear you and come back? Enzo shoved away from her, tears streaming down his face. No, we're loud because if we're bad enough, if we're mean enough, no one will love us. And then, when they leave, it won't hurt. There it was, the terrible logic of traumatized children. Your mama didn't leave because of you, Linda said firmly. She was sick in a way that had nothing to do with how much noise you made, sick in her heart, in her mind. And she loved you so much that I promise you, wherever she is, she doesn't want you to be quiet. She doesn't want you to be mean. She wants you to be loved. 4 small bodies collapsed against her, sobbing finally, grieving at last. In the hallway, Catone stood frozen, listening to his son's cry for the first time since the funeral, and realized he'd been so busy building walls to protect them, he'd trapped them inside their guilt instead. Catone summoned her to dinner like a court appearance. The dining room was excessive. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble, a table that could seat 20. He sat at the head, power radiating from him like cologne. 2 guards stood by the door. This wasn't a conversation. It was a power play. The boys are getting soft, he said without preamble, not offering her a seat. I hired you to control them, not coddle them. Linda pulled out a chair and sat anyway. I wasn't hired to control anyone. I was hired to care for your sons. His jaw tightened. They're Merinos. They need discipline, structure, strength, not. He waved dismissively. Feelings discussions and group hugs. They're 4 years old. They're my heirs. They're traumatized children. Linda's voice remained steady, but steel ran through it. And you're so busy training them to be soldiers that you've forgotten they're allowed to be sons. Catone's hand slammed on the table, making Crystal shudder. The guards shifted. Linda didn't flinch. You don't know anything about my world, he said, voice dropping to something dangerous. Weakness gets you killed. Emotions are liabilities. I'm preparing them for reality. You're preparing them for loneliness, Linda shot back. Your reality, where everyone's an enemy or an asset, where love is leverage, where your own children have to earn your affection by being hard enough, cold enough, exactly like you. Careful, Dr. Matthews. Or what? You'll fire me? Please do, because I won't stand here and watch you turn 4 grieving boys into emotional corpses just because you're too afraid to feel anything yourself. The silence was murderous. Catone stood slowly, his full height and presence meant to intimidate. He moved around the table toward her, a predator circling. Linda stood her ground. My sons will inherit an empire, he said quietly, inches from her face. They need to be stronger than I am. Your sons are crying themselves to sleep every night because they think their mother died hating them, Linda replied, matching his intensity. They don't need a boss, Mr. Marino. They have plenty of those. They need a father brave enough to show them that strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's the courage to feel everything and still choose love. Catone's mask cracked for just a moment, raw, vulnerable, terrified. Then he walked out, leaving Linda standing alone in his fortress, wondering if she'd just saved those boys or gotten herself killed. The alarm screamed at 2 a.m. Linda woke to the sound of gunfire, distant but real, sharp cracks splitting the night. Her training kicked in before her fear could. She ran to the nursery where 4 terrified faces stared at her from their beds. Coats on. Now. No questions. They obeyed instantly, reading the urgency in her voice. She grabbed the emergency bag she'd prepared, water, flashlights, the stuffed animals they pretended not to need. Catone's head of security appeared in the doorway, blood on his sleeve. Panic room, 3rd floor. Boss's orders. Go. Linda had the boys moving before he finished speaking. They ran through marble hallways transformed into war zones, guards shouting coordinates, lights cutting out, the distant thunder of an explosion that shook the foundation. Enzo started to cry. Dante froze at the sound of breaking glass. "Eyes on me," Linda commanded, her voice cutting through chaos. "Only me. Move." The panic room was disguised as a wine cellar. Steel walls, reinforced door, enough supplies for days. Linda sealed them inside. The sounds became muffled but still present. Violence filtered through bulletproof walls. 4 boys stared at her with the terrified understanding that their world was under attack. "We're going to play a game," Linda said calmly, gathering them close. "It's called the Silent Kingdom. We're all royalty hiding from an evil wizard, and the only way he can't find us is if we're completely quiet. Can you do that?" Marco's lip trembled. "What if Papa—" "Your Papa is doing what he does best, protecting his kingdom," Linda interrupted gently. "Our job is to be brave and silent. The quietest team wins." She pulled out a flashlight, making shadow puppets on the wall. Created stories with her hands, a rabbit escaping danger, a bird finding home, a family reuniting. The boys watched, transfixed, their breathing steadying. When the fear crept back in, she held them tighter. When tears started, she wiped them away silently. Hours passed. The sounds of war continued. But inside that steel tomb, 4 boys learned that silence wasn't weakness. It was survival. That being quiet didn't mean being powerless. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust someone to keep you safe. When the door finally opened and Catone stood there, bloodied, exhausted, alive, his sons ran to him. And for the first time, he held them like he was allowed to. Catone's hands were shaking. Linda noticed immediately. The Don of the Eastern Seaboard, the man who commanded armies, had hands that trembled as he held his sons. He checked each boy methodically, professionally, running fingers over small bodies searching for injuries that weren't there. His face a mask of rigid control that was fracturing at the edges. "They're fine," Linda said softly. "Not a scratch." He nodded once, sharp and mechanical, but didn't let go. The boys clung to him with unusual desperation, sensing something broken in their father they'd never seen before. After a moment, he gently extracted himself, standing abruptly. "You did well, Dr. Matthews. Take them to bed." His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. Linda herded the boys toward the door, but Marco looked back. "Papa, are you coming?" "Soon." They left reluctantly. Linda got them settled, staying until each one drifted into exhausted sleep. Then she went looking for Catone. She found him in his office, standing at the window overlooking the estate. Dawn was breaking. Security lights illuminated damage, bullet holes, shattered windows, blood being hosed off marble steps. His empire had been breached, his home violated, his children nearly reached. "Mr. Marino." I couldn't get to them. His voice was raw, stripped of all authority. "I was 3 floors away and I couldn't—" He stopped, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle working. Linda approached slowly, like approaching wounded wildlife. "But they're safe. Because of you." He turned. And the man looking at her wasn't the Don, wasn't the boss, wasn't the legend. He was just a father who'd come within inches of losing everything that mattered. "I built this empire to protect them, to give them power, safety, legacy. And tonight I realized that everything I've built might be exactly what gets them killed." A single tear tracked down his face. Just one, quickly wiped away, but devastating in its rarity. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, voice breaking. "Be what they need. Be soft and strong. Be a father instead of a fortress." Linda closed the distance between them. "You don't have to know how. You just have to try." His control shattered completely then. The most dangerous man in the city collapsed into a chair and wept. For his sons, his dead wife, the innocence he couldn't protect, the love he didn't know how to give. Linda stayed, simply present, unafraid of his pain. Linda's contract ended on a Tuesday. 6 months, as agreed. She packed her bags methodically, professionally, ignoring the way her chest felt hollow. This was always temporary. She'd known that. The boys had therapists now, routines, a father who actually talked to them. Her work here was done, except her shoes were missing. All of them. Every single pair. Heels, flats, sneakers, even her slippers. Her suitcase sat by the door, but her feet were bare. She found the culprits in the nursery, sitting in a row on Enzo's bed like a tiny tribunal. 4 pairs of shoes were hidden behind their backs. "We're not giving them back," Enzo announced. "If you don't have shoes, you can't leave," Luca added logically. "It's kidnapping," Dante said proudly, as if he'd learned the term from his father's business calls. Marco just looked at her with devastating eyes. "Please don't go." Linda's professional composure wavered. "Boys, we talked about this. I was always only staying for 6 months. "That was before," Enzo argued, his voice cracking. "Before you were ours. I'll still visit, I promise." "Promises break," Marco whispered. "Mama promised she'd always be here." Linda's heart shattered cleanly. She knelt down, eye level with them. "I'm not." "Stay." Catone's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his tailored suit, hands in pockets, trying to look casual but failing. The vulnerability from a week ago lingered in his eyes. "Please." "Mr. Marino." "Catone," he corrected quietly. "And this isn't a professional request." He stepped into the room and Linda saw what it cost him. This man who commanded empires, begging in front of his sons. "I'm asking you to stay, not as an employee, as—" He struggled with the word. Something he'd maybe never said out loud. "Family." The boys held their breath. "I don't need a nanny," Catone continued, each word carefully chosen. "I need someone who sees my sons as children instead of soldiers. Someone who isn't afraid of my world but won't let it corrupt theirs. Someone who makes this house feel like a home." He paused. "Someone who makes me want to be better than I am." Linda looked at 4 hopeful faces, then at the man who'd finally learned that the greatest power was allowing yourself to need someone. "I'll need my shoes back," she said softly. 4 pairs of shoes flew across the room. Catone smiled. Genuine, unguarded, devastating. She was home. 1 year later, the Marino estate looked the same from the outside. Imposing gates, armed security, marble columns that spoke of old money and older power. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The nursery no longer resembled a battlefield. Toys were still scattered, but now from play rather than warfare. The walls bore artwork, messy, joyful, unafraid. 4 boys sat at a table working on homework, while Linda reviewed their spelling, her engagement ring catching afternoon light. "Papa's home," Marco announced, hearing the familiar footsteps before anyone else. Catone appeared in the doorway, and the boys didn't freeze. They ran to him, a collision of small bodies and unconditional trust. He caught them easily, laughing in a way that still surprised his security team. The Don who once ruled through fear now ruled a dinner table where the loudest voice belonged to a 4-year-old debating whether dinosaurs or dragons were superior. "How was school?" he asked, and genuinely wanted to know. "Dante pushed a kid," Enzo reported dutifully. Catone's expression sharpened. Linda touched his arm gently, a reminder. "Why?" Catone asked Dante, kneeling to eye level. "He said mean things about Marco." Dante's chin jutted out defensively. "I protected my brother." "Did you use your words first?" Dante hesitated. No. Then tomorrow, you apologize. Merinos protect family, but we do it smart, not violent. Understood? Yes, Papa. It was a small moment, insignificant to anyone else. But Linda saw what it represented. A man teaching his sons that strength didn't require cruelty, that power could coexist with kindness. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Linda found Catone on the balcony overlooking the estate. He pulled her close, and she fit against him like she'd been designed for that exact space. I used to think silence meant weakness, he murmured against her hair, that if my house was quiet, it meant I'd lost control. And now? Now I know silence means peace. He turned her to face him, his eyes holding everything he'd once been too afraid to feel. You didn't just save my sons, Linda. You saved me from becoming the monster I thought I needed to be. She kissed him softly. You were never a monster, just a man who forgot he was allowed to be human. Below them, the Merino Empire continued its operations, deals, power, legacy. But up here, in the quiet, a family had finally learned that the greatest kingdom wasn't built on fear. It was built on love, brave enough to be gentle. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you think. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe, like, and tell me what you felt in the comments. I read every single one because this isn't just storytelling, it's connection. And if you're ready for the next journey, don't wander too far. The next story is already waiting in the dark.